morning, everybody. Clearly it's early on student time, so glad you're here. Hopefully this is a great day. As Minar mentioned, we've been doing this for a while. This was originally conceptualized as something that computer science, who was then in the College of Arts and Sciences and the College of Business, could collaboratively do to look forward. NETT Day stands, of course, for Northeastern Empowerment Through Technology. So it's an acronym, and then day, obviously. We pick one day a year to do this. So over the years, this has always been forward-looking at how technology has come into and facilitates our lives. And, you know, when computer science moved into the college about 3 years ago, you know, it got even more fun because the brainstorming started among the faculty in the hallways instead of waiting for a committee meeting. And so it's been fun to watch it evolve. And, you know, we're delighted. This is one of the signature events of the college every fall. So with that, I say welcome to all of you to this 15th NETT Day. And back to you for the next introduction, I believe. So thank you, Minar, and everyone who put this together.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to NETT Day 15. Okay. Let's give a warm welcome to Chris, one of our own accomplished alumni and an experienced analytical lead at Microsoft. With a degree in business administration and an MBA from NEIU, Chris has built an impressive career, constantly expanding his skill set, from self-teaching SQL and Tableau to now mastering Python and Power BI. Today, he is here to share his journey of career growth and the importance of self-learning. Please join me in giving him a round of applause.
Hello. Okay. Hey, how's everybody doing? Everybody hear me good? All right. Jessica's in the house. How we doing? So I got a cool topic today. Topic is data literacy and tech skills. So really what I'm trying to communicate to you guys is what are some of the skills you're going to need in the business world, whether you're going into data or not? Because really the environment that we're in the business world is everybody's using data now. If you're in sales, if you're in HR, if you're in finance, if you're in operations, it doesn't matter what you're doing. You're probably going to be working with a database, an information management system. You're probably going to be working with Microsoft Excel, and you're going to have to be data proficient, right? And how far you go on that doesn't matter. It's like we're in 2024. I promise you're going to be hands-on, and that's what's going to empower you. So the presentation today, I want it to be a little bit of half and half. I want it to be, you know, I got materials to present, but I don't want it to be a monologue. So if you have questions like on a current slide, raise your hand. If you want to like add to what I'm saying, raise your hand. And then in the end, I want to have like some Q&A, or we can change topics. We could talk about AI. We could talk about Microsoft. We could talk about, you know, what's helped me or any questions that you have. Because I did graduate here from NEIU, so I kind of know that journey from like getting my first entry-level role to where I am now. So let's go to the next slide and we'll get started. Awesome. So kind of an outline of the presentation. If you see right at the top, the goal is I want you guys to take away something of value. What that is, it doesn't matter. It could be nothing that I even talk about. It could be internal thoughts. It could be speaking skills. It could be, you know, passion for data, whatever that is, just try to learn something. That's kind of the frame that I had when I was at NEIU. I'm trying to read the slides from all the way over there. But real briefly, we'll go into my introduction, my background, my professional growth. We're going to go into the second topic, which is working with data. So what is data literacy? What are some popular tech platforms out there? How do you continue learning? Most of the tech platforms I learned, I'm self-taught. So NEIU did a great job of giving me a business degree and an MBA, but to get into tech, I had to teach myself. What are some best practices and career advice? I have one of my fellow alumni, Fidel, here. He might have some advice later on. We both graduated from NEIU as well. And then the fourth point, I made that clear in the beginning, is audience participation. So I want to hear from you guys. Feel free to raise your hand and we'll take it from there. we'll go. Oh, I do? Is this? Love it. Okay. So this is my career journey, but the key is like everybody's career journey is going to be different. There's no, looking back, I never could have predicted this. A lot of the times when I switched roles, I wasn't looking for new jobs, and I'll explain that. But essentially, it all started here at Northeastern Illinois University. I'm an untraditional student. I started college at 27 years old, right? So I was doing restaurant industry. I did sales. I worked with my hands. I did some carpentry. So I had no business background, and I eventually decided to go to college. I got my business degree here in 2018, and then I went right into my MBA 2020. I was a graduate assistant. I helped tutor students in the College of Business. And then that's kind of where I got my passion for data. I'm like, man, I want to work with data. I want to work with Excel. Like we did a regression analysis, and I thought that stuff was cool. So I graduated. The graduation ceremony was actually canceled because of COVID. So May 4th, it was supposed to be graduation day. We didn't have it. But May 4th, I got my first job offer. They called me and they said, hey, we want to give you an entry-level role at Kimco Facility Services, or a janitorial company nationwide, as an entry-level analyst. And I was so excited. So I took that role. It was very hard to get that role. It took dozens and dozens of applications and months and months and months on end because I didn't have data experience. But the main requirement for that role was Excel. I had some basic Excel. I got in. While I was there, I continued to teach myself and learn and learn new tech platforms, right? So self-learning is a key theme here. But I taught myself advanced Microsoft Excel, SQL, and Power Query. In my role, those weren't required, but I kept seeing analytical roles online that required those skills. So I learned it. And through learning it, I got promoted to a senior analyst, which was great. I started training new analysts as they came in, and I really got my resume rock solid. The company got bought. I started looking around. I was like, man, things might change. They're still running today, but eventually I got in with Vonage, which was a much larger company. They're a part of Ericsson. So now they're a global company. They're doing billions of dollars in sales versus millions. And I came in as a business analyst too, and I eventually got promoted to a senior business analyst. But the requirement for that job, like you had to know SQL and you had to know Tableau. And my prior job, I wasn't using SQL and I wasn't using Tableau, but I taught it myself, right? So when I did the job interview, they said, do you have 2 years of experience with SQL and 2 years experience with Tableau? My answer was yes, right? I self-taught myself. They're like, well, you're not using it in your current company? And I said, no. But I taught it and I know how to use it. And they asked me technical questions. I answered it and they gave me the job. So if I just went with, do you have the experience? And I just said, no, I wouldn't have gotten the job. But like I said, I moved in as a BA2 and then I got promoted to a senior business analyst. And then now today I'm at Microsoft. So once again, I wasn't looking for a job, but I was actually at an event. I was networking. I was talking to someone about data. They were in supply chain and somebody overheard. And she's like, hey, you're an analyst? I said, yeah. And she goes, I'm hiring an analyst. I'm like, for what company? She's like, Microsoft. I said, okay, let's connect on LinkedIn. I connected on LinkedIn. And she said, the job posting closes on Friday. If you want to apply, I applied. There was 400 applications. I got into the interviews. We did 5 interviews. Now I work for Microsoft. So, part of that journey was self-learning, because even when I was at Vonage, I continued the self-growth and learning and these technical skills, which were all required to get into Microsoft, obviously. And you kind of got to talk the talk there. And there's multiple rounds of interviews. Some are on like diversity and inclusion. Some are on team collaboration. There's one that's specifically on tech. And on tech, they literally ask you, where'd you learn your tech? How do you know it? Explain to us. And they don't expect you to be perfect, but they want to see that passion. Oh, I got the next slide here. So here's some resources for self-learning, because I can keep telling you like teach yourself, but that's kind of vague. But the way that I did it was LinkedIn. You could follow many industry professionals. They post awesome content. If you're looking for Excel, type in Excel under the search bar, people will pop up. I have a whole bunch of recommendations. If you connect with me on LinkedIn, I'll send you a list. There's also LinkedIn Learning. The problem with that is it's kind of expensive, but when I was at NEIU, the first month is free. I signed up, I did an Excel certification and I canceled it. But I got one certification from LinkedIn Learning for free. Udemy is great. I have multiple certifications from Udemy. That's $20 a month, very inexpensive. I'm currently using DataCamp as we speak. I just did in the last couple months 2 Power BI certifications and 2 Python certifications. That's about $30 a month, but right now it's half off. And I think it runs like through today or tomorrow. It's a sale right now. And then books are YouTube. I don't want to underestimate how important they are. And I have some examples, but YouTube's free. You can go in there and how do I do certain examples of code and they'll show you. or how do I use Power BI, or how do I use Tableau? And the books are important as well. And I want to be, once again, give you specific examples of what has worked for me. So these are the 4 books that I read in my first company, Kimco, to teach myself, Power Query, which is a part of Microsoft Excel, and then how to do SQL. So the first book you could buy on Amazon, it's like $19. You could probably buy it on eBay for like $6. But this book's really cool because what it has you do is it teaches you how to load PostgreSQL onto your computer. It's a SQL server directly in your computer, and it gives you a sample data set. And then it teaches you how to like write basic queries. Like and a query means there's a large pile of data. How do I pull some of that information out? Very short book. You can read it in a week. Once I did that, I said, I want to get better. So I read the next book from Alex Zhao. I've connected to her on LinkedIn as well. Amazing book. And she's going to go more into depth on how do you write like advanced queries and do analytics and window functions and case statements and all these crazy things you can do to manipulate data in a database, which every company uses, by the way. Every company has a database. That's where they store it, whether it's internal or it's in the cloud. It's important. And then the final book is very advanced. I probably took away like 60% of that book, but that's like, far and above like data analytics in SQL. So it's not only just querying data, but doing advanced functions. And that really got me proficient. And then through reading those books, when I got my job at Vonage, they asked me very specific questions. I was able to answer it and talk about functions. Speaking of Udemy, I did all these certifications while I worked at Vonage: Snowflake, forecasting and time series, Tableau, SQL, advanced data science. Each class takes, I think the longest one was a Snowflake. That was like 9 hours. The other classes are all 2 to 3 hours each. I mean, if you can't do a class in a week for 2 weeks, right? They're not that long. And then you list it as a certification or a class that I took, and you could talk. Data Camp, like I said, I just did 4 certifications in there. Microsoft or LinkedIn, I did statistical process control. I did that for free. Taught me Excel, helped me get my first job. And then I follow industry experts. And then finally, there was actually a Groupon. So there's 6 Sigma Black Belt certifications. Some of them are like conferences that you go to. I know somebody that went and got their green belt at an actual conference, but this was an online one. I think the course was like $899, but the Groupon was $199. So I bought it. I spent like, I don't know, 7 or 8 weeks. I tested and I got certified in it. I've never used it, but I tell you on my resume, everybody talks about it. It looks really good. So, invest in yourself, get those certifications, add it to your resume. Does anyone have any, I'm talking quick. Does anyone have any like questions? Are we doing good? Right? Okay, cool. So data literacy, you could probably have an entire class on this. Like, what is data literacy? At a high level, it's not only being able to interact with data, but being able to understand it and communicate it. So I chose some random topics here. It's really hard to see without the screen on. But this is going to be important in the business field. And in the top right, I wrote employees who display data literacy in their work and their work-related conversations are going to go further, get promoted, and make better decisions. I've seen it time and time again. I work specifically with data, but every one of our team members in the company interacts with data, especially salespeople, especially finance. And sometimes companies have turnover and sometimes there's layoffs, and it happens, and I've seen it. But this pattern I've always seen is when they're making those decisions on who to lay off, the ones that are really kind of vocal on the calls and are using the company resources and are talking about the data and trends, they typically make the cut. And then when they say, hey, we downsized the sales team and we let 3 people go, I've noticed trends too, where those were the ones that always never really understood the reporting and couldn't tell you what happened year over year. And when you ask them to access a report, they always ask you, where's that report again? How do I find it? The companies all have a source of truth, whatever that is, whether it's Tableau, Power BI, whether it's Microsoft Excel reports, and you're going to have to be able to read those reports, use them. And then when you're on these calls and you're making decisions, you're going to have to talk to those data points. So that's what data literacy is, right? Reading data, writing data, even if you're not an engineer, that's literally working with a spreadsheet or financial statements or doing variances. Communicating data, this is a key because a lot of times you're going to notice something or a trend that you want to speak about or an area that you want to improve, or you're setting your goals for next quarter. You're going to have to not just say a number, but maybe put that into a PowerPoint presentation and outline that in a nice graph. And the ones that take that data and kind of make their own graph and put it in their own slide, they always stand out because they're like, wow, this person's really getting hands-on with it. Reasoning with data, is it make sense what you're seeing? Oh, last year we grew 10,000%. before I make that claim, I might want to look at the data further because there could be something really strange that happened. You know, we saw that in COVID a lot where stores were shut down or there was lockdowns or mandates and then they reopened or they were closed for a month and they reopened. The last thing you want to say is, oh, look, we grew 10 times last month. I think we're going to continue this trend. You know, what happened during that time frame? So kind of, you know, you want to reason when you see weird stuff, whether it's positive or negative, and that comes with critical thinking. Proficiency with the resources, whatever the company has available, that's their source of truth. The problem is it's never perfect. So I've seen it a lot of times where I guess you would call it swimming upstream. It's a lot harder than swimming downstream, but people will have reports and maybe they're not perfect and they would always fight it and try to come up with their own numbers and their own logic. And then on calls, they're stating that, you know, their own basically financial metrics or performance metrics. And everyone keeps asking, where are you getting this data? Oh, I did it in my own spreadsheet. I did it this way. But if you're looking at data differently than the entire company, you're kind of fighting the entire organization. So point out if there's like flaws in what you're seeing, but part of that is we all have to have a unified source of information, which is going to come from the resources available in the company, and fix them if you need from there. Business logic is essentially every company has a way that they define and classify their data and what their goals and objectives are, understand that. And soft skills is the most important because the ones that go the furthest are the ones that can actually talk in a non-technical language, right? You don't want to be on a call and someone asks you, how did you do this analysis? And you start talking about raw code. You're going to look, I don't know, I guess know your audience, and it's not going to come off very in a clean and a concise way. So the skill is taking very complex things and then communicating it in a very simple manner. And overall, I think that's a nice overview of data literacy. So working with data, number one, Microsoft Excel. I encourage everybody in this room to get proficient with Microsoft Excel. If you go to Data Camp online and sign up for their subscription, there's Microsoft Excel courses, starting from introduction to intermediate. The reason I say you need to learn it, because it doesn't matter what field you're going into, you're going to access Microsoft Excel. There's going to be some sort of a system or a database or an HRIS system or financial or customer data, and you're always going to not only have the interface, you're always going to be able to export it. You're always going to send your colleague a spreadsheet. You're always going to have to work with it. Most of the jobs you apply for nowadays, I'd say if you went on LinkedIn or Indeed, they're going to say Microsoft Excel in the job description. Do you have to be a pro? No. But when they ask you, can you work with spreadsheets? Can you do formulas? Can you make a graph in Excel? You're going to have to just confidently say yes. And I did that on my first job, even though I was not a pro, but it got me in the door. And then I got way better from there. So here's an example of some of my work, the top graph. This is a performance dashboard I made for T-Mobile when I worked for Kimco. This analyzed service performance metrics, created it from scratch. We updated it weekly. We went over it on all of our business calls and QBRs. They loved it. They could filter it. They can go through all the data. There's thousands of records behind it, which they were provided as well, but they really like the interface and be able to play with it. On one of our QBRs with another performance, this is actually a PowerPoint slide. We just did some work order performance metrics. Both the graphs were made in Excel. They're very simple, but this was a highlight of one of our QBRs with a warehouse that we serviced. And then when COVID happened, we had a lot of stores that were requiring, not in all states, New York was a big one, California was a big one. They were requiring that our janitors were vaccinated to service some of these locations. So for those specific accounts, we had to keep performance metrics on how many employees we have, how many were vaccinated, how many were not, what is our progress towards these goals? And in order to keep our contracts with these companies like AT&T and such, you know, we had to work towards these goals and we had to track these HR metrics. The data behind it of who the employees was obviously hidden because that's personal medical information, but we had to ensure that we were working towards these goals and these mandates that were placed in our company, or we were going to lose contracts, right? All that tracking was done in Excel and all the communication to the clients were done in Excel, and it helped us keep our business. So a good example of an immediate business case where we needed something quick. Clicker is not working. Perfect. So the next one is SQL, right? SQL, we call it SQL in the business world. If you say SQL, you're going to sound like kind of amateur, right? So call it SQL. unless you're going to directly work with data, you're not going to need to know SQL because this is the raw database. But it's also good to understand what it is so you don't sound like a layman when you're on a call, or you're in an interview and they're like, do you have experience with databases? This is where databases are. You know, these are some big ones. Snowflake, SQL Server, PostgreSQL, MySQL is a big one. There's like dozens of them. There's MongoDB. Like every company has a database. And it's a central repository for data. Back in the day, they used to build big servers like in a building like this and store all your data. Most of it's in the cloud now. So you pay for storage. I think my prior company was paying $80,000-$90,000 a month just to store their data. So that's how much data we're talking about. But it's really valuable because everything the company does, from financial performance to employee performance to any metric that you track, third-party systems, payments, it all gets piped into a database. It should, right? Unless your data is all over the place. And SQL is the way that it does it. So like these are some of the top ones. Oracle is really big in the space. Postgre is really cool. That first book I showed you, it's free. You can put it on your PC and use it yourself. So large companies won't use it, but a lot of people learn on Postgre because it's a completely free open source SQL server. Microsoft SQL Server obviously is big. Snowflake, the reason it's not that popular is because it's super expensive, but a lot of the top companies in the world are using it because it's extremely fast and it has a lot of compute power. So once again, the cost is very high, so people try to minimize those costs, but certain companies that have like big demands on the models that they use, they'll pay more to have that cloud storage and that compute power. And then this is an example of like some code, like I wrote this code, and this is not even big. Like that's 14 lines. This is 22 lines. I've had some models that are 350 lines and they take 4, 5, 6 months to make. But in the end, it's very simple. All you're doing is you're pulling information from your database. So your select statement, select means what columns am I selecting? So if you have a file, a Microsoft Excel file, you have rows and you have columns, right? Every column has values in it. Select is tell me which columns I want to pull. So I want the month, the date. That's basically the date. I want the account ID. I want the account name, the account type, the account group, what vertical it's in, what segment it is, and then what are the metrics I'm looking for? So the sum of the spend, right, added up per account, the sum of how many clicks and the sum of how many impressions. This is marketing data. So I'm just telling the database, what columns do I want? All those fields are stored in individual tables. So think of a database as like a whole bunch of Microsoft Excel files, sometimes 100,000 Microsoft Excel files. And that's where you do your joins. So wherever those little tables are, you have to join all those in. You're pulling it into your data source, right? Your where clause is like a filter. We're filtering. So in this case, we're doing a date. I want the current date -2. So today, the current date of the year is 2024. Looking back 2 years is 2022. So I want data from 2022 to current. And then we're grouping that all together. Looks complicated. It's really not. Another example here is we're looking for very specific values, right? So we have a whole bunch of records of these are interactions with customer service. So one account can have 30, 40, 50 interactions with customer service. In this case, I want to know what's the first interaction they had with customer service. What was that date? I want to know the last interaction they had with customer service. I want to know all the associated information with it. And then I computed some metrics here. The average of how long it took to close their ticket. What was the minimum amount of days it took to close their ticket? What is the maximum amount of days it took to close their ticket? Pulled it from the account and did it from there. So what we get is we take millions of records, and now we have one record for every single account with their first interaction, last interaction, and what their trends are. And we use that to try to like predict like accounts that might be having more problems than others and why that they're having these problems. So that's an example of working with SQL, but if you're not going to be working with data directly, it doesn't matter. But there's examples where people have had to get on a phone call with a data engineer and say, no, you don't understand. I need to know the first value and the last value, and you have to help them write this code. And sometimes there's collaborative calls involved on that. And then we go to BI tools, right? So BI tools is, think of Microsoft Excel, but at a much larger scale. And you're able to work with millions and millions of records. Microsoft Excel goes to about 1 million records. These are unlimited. They're also automated and they're live. So if I put out a BI report to my company and they log in today, there's no version control issues because the data is refreshed on a specific schedule, right? So these are like the sources of truth for most companies. The top two are Tableau and Power BI. I started with Tableau. I obviously work for Microsoft now. We own Power BI, so I use Power BI. There's a whole bunch of different tools that are available out there. SAP is a large one. I think Signum, you teach SAP, don't you? You teach SAP, okay. QLick is another one I've heard about. Looker's becoming more popular. There's a bunch, but the top two, unfortunately, well, I will include SAP, but the top two are Tableau and Power BI. And essentially what these do is all that data I just talked about in that SQL database that stores the company data, that gets synced to these BI tools, and then you literally log into a report. Now, why are these important? Because when you go work for a large company, your data that you're going to be accessing will most likely come from a BI tool. So you might not have to create reports and actually do the manual calculations, but you're going to have to be able to access like sales reports like we have here. I created this for a sales team at the top. These are monthly trends, and they can change all the dimensions and by quarter, by year, and trends. This is a variance report based on customer growth, right? And sales teams are enabled to use it. So they'll just interact with it based on a filter level, and they'll maybe search for their particular accounts and understand trends. A lot of times it's going to be bumped up against whatever your quotas are. So how do you know if you're making quota or not? You're going to have to use a report like this. The good news is interacting with the reports are very easy. They're very easy to do. Some of those classes that I showed on either Udemy or Data Camp, they're 2 to 3 hours long. So you could literally go in and do an introduction to Power BI course and an introduction to Tableau course and be done. But on your resume, you could put you have 2 certifications in BI tools. And then when you're getting a job and they say, we're using Tableau at our company. Oh, I know Tableau. I have a certification in Tableau. They're going to love it. Like, you're going to stand out above everybody else. And I highly recommend that you do it. Even if you're not going on the back end and actually creating the data that and the formulas that empower these reports. We're jumping into programming languages. So there's a whole bunch available here regarding data science. Python and R are 2 big ones. I think NEIU does a little work with R. Do you guys have a little work with R? Okay. Other ones are more computer science like Java and C++, and you can create web pages, you can create applications. I don't really do that in my job field, but for data analytics, Python and R are big. These are really advanced. So even now I'm just starting to touch like working with Python. It's very complex. Like, this is the code. I couldn't even explain it to you. In my opinion, it's not very pleasing to the eye. It's just wild, but you can do anything. You can literally make a video game in Python and hit publish, and someone could start playing a video game. So the possibilities are endless. The cool thing that it's good for are what are called APIs. So there are different ways that you can connect one system to communicate with the other, or get multiple systems to come together and bring the data. Those can be done through APIs in Python. There's also a lot of machine learning and data science. With Python, much of the code is open source. So I could start learning Python from scratch, which I've just done 2 certifications, but there's open source code out there. So I can literally find out, I'm looking to do a seasonality analysis with 5 dimensions of data, go into the repository, find a validated piece of code, paste it, plug in my data sources and hit submit, and it'll run a statistical analysis on it. So you could try to become good. I'm not going to, of doing raw code in Python, but I am starting to use this based on like finding existing code that's out there and plugging your own data in. The other thing is, once again, I've done 2 certifications, introduction and intermediate Python. I'm going to go one more. Is in the future, it's going to be on my resume. And if anyone asks, do you have experience working with Python? My answer is going to be yes. And that's the key point I'm trying to communicate to everybody here. The last area are called CRMs. So customer relationship management. Once again, it's an information system. Every company has one. Salesforce is a big one. NetSuite's really big. SAP is really big. Every company has to track what's going on. If you have a customer that calls in and they're interested in services, you have to log who the customer is, what their address is, what their phone number is, who's the point of contact, what's the opportunity they're looking for. That's typically what you're trying to sell them. What's the quote? What are they purchasing from you? How many have we fulfilled? What's our delivery metrics? Leads are essentially, they're like opportunities. If you do a trade show and people are interested in your business, you create them as a lead, they'll eventually move into an opportunity. And campaign is anything marketing related. So if you're a company and you're investing in marketing, you're doing TV ads, you're doing Google search ads, any type of marketing, you're going to create campaigns. And sometimes it's even trade shows. If you're doing an event and you're going to downtown Chicago and meeting with people, you create a campaign for that, what the cost is, and then you would track what the return is on that. It all gets put into a CRM. Salesforce is, like I said, one of the leaders in the industry right now. They're kind of expensive, but you know, they're not expensive in the beginning, but the bigger your company becomes, it starts to add up really quick. But once again, whenever you're working for a large company, you're going to end up using a CRM system. So it's good to know what it is, look it up online. The interface is really easy. So this is an example of Salesforce right here. I mean, there's objects at the top. Right now we're on the account object. So for this account, this is Soliant Consulting. This is the information for Soliant Consulting. If I go to other tabs such as leads, I can see what are all the leads in the account, opportunities. Those include deals that we've won. Those include deals that we lost. It also includes like open proposals that we're trying to win over for this company. And all the information gets entered into here. The one thing that's key is like data hygiene. You want to be very careful in how you put data in the system, because if one person is entering data one way and you're entering it another way, if you're capitalizing everything and somebody isn't, if you're making abbreviations that nobody is, if you're calling it United States of America when the whole company calls it USA, you're going to start to have what's called like messy data, and it's going to ruin a lot of reporting. So most jobs, if you're ever going to interact with a CRM, which many will, whether you're in HR, finance, sales, data, there's going to be training involved and what are company protocols and how to do it. And it's very important. So when you hear the word data hygiene, what is that? Clean data, junk in equals junk out. And then a lot of times when the data is really messy, which has happened, it takes huge projects to create like actually code to rewrite it and overwrite the whole system. And it's a huge pain, costs lots of money and lots of time. But you know, the key concept is, what is a CRM? If you're on a job interview call and they ask, do you know what a CRM is? You want to say yes. And I know how important data hygiene is and how important it is to interact with company data. So going into the, you know, career advice, right? Best advice I have for you right now is build your resume now. Do it while you're in college. If you've already graduated, you should be updating your resume and get your LinkedIn ready. So I started my LinkedIn when I was here at NEIU. I was in my undergrad. I think it was a class. The professor encouraged us to do it. But I logged on, I created an account, I started my LinkedIn, I started connecting to NEIU people. I didn't really have much experience then, but I put in whatever experience I had. And then as I started learning things, I started adding that in my skills section. So now in the top right, licenses and certifications, I have 14, right? I started with 1. It was the Microsoft Excel certification I did at LinkedIn for free. Now it's up to 14. So the LinkedIn is very important for a few reasons. One is like, nowadays, whenever you apply for a job, they're going to look you up on LinkedIn, even if you didn't meet them or mention LinkedIn. And if you're not on LinkedIn, they can't really validate who you are, and they're getting stacks of resumes. So unfortunately, they might start to weed you out if they can't really research who you are. I know people that work in HR, and they're always looking up people's LinkedIn and just checking if the application matches what their online profile says. So make that presence. The second thing is you got to create a rock solid resume. There's a lot of creative ways to make resumes. I've seen them where they're really cool and they have like cool borders and pictures and backgrounds. A standard resume should look simple. This is a standard resume. This is my resume. It's just bullet points, code, sentences, clean, neat, straight. I would avoid all that crazy, weird formatting, because these recruiters, you know, for the job I got at Microsoft, there was 470 applications. You know, when they get 470 applications, it's really hard to go through all that and weed them out. And sometimes when they're all crazy and creative, they overlook it because they don't have the time. They just want to see your education, your experience, and what your skills are. Neat and clean, just like that. I've seen dozens and dozens and dozens of resumes of people that have been hired at companies, especially in tech, and they all look like this. One of the creative things I did, it worked for my first job at it worked for my first job getting into Kimco, and then it worked for Vonage, and then it worked for Microsoft. And the last two specifically, the recruiter said, "Why did you do that? Can you explain that to me?" I created a second page with examples of my work. It's actually 3 pages now. So my resume is a 2-page resume. I submit it all as one document. This is a PowerPoint slide. This is an Excel graph. This is a dashboard I did. This was sample data in Tableau. It's like completely made up. I did that when I was learning Tableau. It's just not even real company data, but it looks real. I put a logo on it and I submit that with my application. So the last 2 jobs I had, the recruiter goes, could you explain to me like the second page? What is this graph here? And I said, oh, that's a chart I made for T-Mobile. And he goes, where did you make that? I go, Excel. Okay, what about this top one? Oh, I did that in Tableau. Oh, that's really cool. And what made you think to do that? Well, I just want to share examples of my work. Got passed on to the next round. On the interview with the hiring panel, we literally went over the exact thing. Can you explain some of your work? So now it's versus them asking me, give me examples of your work or answer this question. We've now focused it on like a topic that I'm familiar with. So it's worked for me several times. I'm not encouraging you all to do it. If you're also interested, you can create a cover letter and share examples of your work. The thing is, for some of you that are graduating or you're in college now, you're like, I don't really have examples of my work yet. You kind of do. Like at NEIU, there's PowerPoint presentations you have to create. There's capstone classes that you have to create. There's work that you have done, and it could be a slide. Like this is literally a slide in a PowerPoint deck. If you could show some of your work now and put it in your application, you could show these employers that you have experience with Excel, you have experience with PowerPoint, you have examples of your work. And then the best thing is when you're on the interview, they're going to probably ask you about your work, which you already know how to answer the question, versus them asking you an abstract question and you might start stuttering, which is very common. You know, if you're lacking the skills, get familiar. You don't need to be an expert, but you should be able to speak at a high level. And what I mean by that is whatever the field you're looking to go into, you could do this today. You can go to Indeed, you can go to LinkedIn. For instance, if you want to be an analyst, you go to LinkedIn, you type in analyst under the job section, whole bunch of jobs pop up. Click on 10 of them and just scroll down to the job requirements. They're going to see common trends. So if you're trying to go into HR, go into HR. Click on 10 of them. I was just doing this the other day. I did a presentation downtown. Someone was interested in HR. We looked at 10 jobs. They all mentioned HRIS, Human Resource Information System, and they all mentioned Excel. So I told her, your resume needs to say HRIS and Excel. Otherwise, you're going to get weeded out. If you go into sales, you're probably going to see things like CRM systems, right? Quotas, metrics, OKRs, things like that. So you want to get familiar with whatever those job requirements are, because when you're applying against hundreds of people. And I hate to say it, when you're not hitting those keywords, they filter your resume out. You send your resume in, you're missing 8 of the 10 words that they are looking for, those words, they filter it out. So you have to include those in your resume. And if you're not a pro, that's fine. You can take an online class and then now you can speak to the topic. You can do a YouTube class, a Udemy, anything like that, and put those keywords in there and say, oh, I have a certification in that. I did a program. And now your resume is not getting filtered out. A lot of words I have in my resume. Technical skills. I have a lot of keywords in here that are very strategically placed. Salesforce CRM, like that's my prior job. Salesforce was a requirement, you know, and had I just submitted an application, I might have gotten filtered out if I didn't have Salesforce, that one word in my resume. So that's the best advice I can give for resumes. And I love this. I love this right here. The 5 years of experience for an entry-level role. I mean, everybody's laughing. And it kind of is funny because that's how it works. The first job I got at Kimco, they wanted 2 years of experience. I had 0. Like, I was like, how am I going to get this entry-level data role with 2 years experience? But what they wanted was they wanted somebody that was like new Excel and can work. So on the call, when they started asking questions, I think the specific question they had in my entry-level data role was, if you had financial statement from the prior year to the current year, what would you do to analyze the differences? And I said, my answer was, I made it up at the time, I'd create a column, I'd calculate the variance between the 2 years, express it as a percentage, sort it from largest to smallest, and probably use conditional formatting to highlight it. They loved it because I gave an answer of working with Excel. What would I do? I would just calculate the variance and sort it, express it as a percentage. I kind of learned that through finance class, but they wanted 2 years of experience working with Excel. I had 0, but I was able to talk the talk. I was able to show my certification along with my education, and I got the job. So a lot of these roles that you're going to be looking for, they're always going to have some sort of a requirement on there, unless it's an internship. They're going to want experience, but we're not going to have it. So you have to find the way to get the experience on your resume, which is through taking classes and speaking to it, and then applying. The first job I got, I think I spent 4 months applying to like 10 to 12 places a day. I mean, I only did easy apply because I wasn't logging into the individual websites and filling out their entire forms, which take forever. So I was just easy apply, and Indeed, and LinkedIn. And I was barely getting hits. Every so often I would get a hit and then I wouldn't qualify. So one of those CRMs I talked about earlier was NetSuite. Let's go back. NetSuite. I had a second round interview. I did the first interview, I passed. I got to the second round interview, and no matter what I said or what I did, they didn't care. I had no experience with NetSuite. And they said, listen, you sound really good. I need somebody that knows NetSuite. Interview ended there. There's nothing I can do. But later I ended up at a different company, so it didn't matter. So, but I was able to get to the second round interview, but I didn't have the experience. So once again, you got to find a way. Maybe if I told them too, I'll learn NetSuite. I'll go online. I'll do a certification. It didn't matter. But maybe if I had that in advance, I could have got it, but I'm not upset. It worked out really well. So this is the key. You got to stay motivated. Your first job out of college is going to be hard. Let me check this one. Oh yeah, I'm going to go there. And then I want to get Fidel's input because he knows about career advice. Actually, I'll stop there because we got time. Fidel, do you have anything you want to add? Yeah, come on up. Yeah, thank you. We went to college together, so we were classmates.
Yeah. So I actually found his post on LinkedIn. He was saying, "Hey, I'm gonna do this session," and number one, I was just so proud to see a fellow alumni give back to the school that gave us all of these skills and all of these expertise. And I was like, you know what, let me clean up my schedule. Let me go show support to my alumni. And it was such a pleasure seeing you up here and giving all of you some valuable insights. If I can supplement what Chris had said and echo a couple of things, definitely tailor your cover letter to each of the positions that you're applying for. Make sure that you're talking the talk, that you're walking the walk. On that notion of tailoring your cover letter, use that same mentality when you're thinking about scholarships. Some of these scholarships are pretty much the same requirements. Give us a letter letting us know what you're trying to do. You can reuse that. Give us 2 letters of recommendations. There are hundreds of thousands of scholarships out there. I got some scholarships just because nobody applied for it. Whether it's Coca-Cola, whether it's McDonald's, whether it's Goya, you name it. Just start searching. There's thousands of scholarships out there, and those are going to be great for you to also include within your resume to show that you're proactive, to show that you're willing to put in the work to gain some of those valuable benefits. All right, so besides tailoring your cover letter to each of the positions that you apply for, make sure that your resume is clean and it's highlighting all of the main details. One of the main things that I want to emphasize here is public speaking. It takes a lot of nerve to get up in front of a large group of people. You have all probably experienced this when you're doing a presentation in front of your class. Practice, practice, practice. Whether it's practicing to your cat, to your dog, to your mom, to your aunt, make sure that whenever you have a presentation to give, that you feel confident and comfortable up here. Right now, I'm a little nervous because I didn't really practice for this. I kind of just talked to Chris, and I'm like, hey man, if you would like me to supplement a little bit about what you were saying, I'm here and I'm all for it. There is an organization that I recommend all of you to look into. It's called Toastmasters. Toastmasters is an international club. It's ran by volunteers, so everyone that attends this club is there to help give back to all of you. Essentially, this club allows you to practice your public speaking skills. They do some ad hoc questions, challenging you on how you can articulate your responses really quickly in a 1 or 2 sentence manner. I will also want to say Toastmasters is not just the ability to practice your communication skills, but to also network. I hated going to conferences. Now I feel it's crucial for me to go to conferences, to be able to build a network, to look for positions, to start to think about senior positions. So attend those conferences, network. Another aspect of Toastmasters that I really love is some of the leadership opportunities that it provides you. I'm the VP of memberships for my corporate Toastmasters club. And right now I'm focusing on expanding that club to all of the Americas. So right now we have club locations in New York, Chicago, Texas, but we're recently starting to launch the club in Mexico and in Brazil. So we have a fully holistic organization where we have other people from different cultures hop in. We get to learn a little bit from them. They get to learn a little bit from us. All right, so Toastmasters, definitely Google that, look it up. They have a really great website. I think it's super cheap too. I think it's like $60 per year for you to join. Besides that, I want to say, I mentioned the networking, go to conferences. The people that are sitting next to you, get them on LinkedIn. Start to grow your network on LinkedIn. How else would I have been able to see that Chris was going to do this event and then, hop on here and get a chance to speak to all of you? Besides that, when you start to get into a role, when you get a position at your company, ask for resources. I work at Ion Group. I'm the manager of internal training. So my focus is learning and development and talent development. We have lots of resources for all of our employees. I want to say 30 to 40% of all of the employees use these resources, but our goal is to continue to expand, to create exposure, to give all of them the opportunity to leverage these resources. So ask, if you get a job, what resources are you have? Can you help me pay for a class? If I'm looking for a master's program, if I'm looking to get a certification, what options are on the table for me to leverage? Besides that, the last thing I'll note is start to build your personal brand. Now, this was something that I got from a coach / a mentor that I have at my organization. He asked me a question. When you leave the room, what are 3 adjectives that come to mind when people think about you? And I'm like, I honestly don't know. And he was like, start to ask. So I started to ask. People were saying energy, positive mindsets, very proactive. And I started to think about how I can continue to expand upon that. How can you expand upon that in LinkedIn? How can you showcase that that you contribute back to your community? How can you showcase your skills? So think about your personal brand. Those were a lot of bullet points I just wrote down right before I got up here, but I'll pause here for a moment and see if you have any questions for me. No? Cool. And get comfortable being in front of a mic, holding a mic. So whether it's karaoke, that's a good way, but yeah, definitely be comfortable with your presentation skills. It's going to take you a long way. Okay. Oh, we have a question back there. Yeah, go ahead. Brave volunteer. I love it. Good. Let's give her a round of applause.
So we've talked about networking a lot, right?
Yeah.
Network. Sorry, when you go to conferences, usually they're paid. They have a really big sum that you see up there. How do we approach networking as a student?
Networking as a student. Let's see. Faculty is great. Alumni are great. Attending events, whether it's something like they have a event at the PE building, attended, right? There are lots of resources within here and lots of events that you can leverage. So I'd say also pay close attention to scholarship opportunities. You can start to know recruiters within those organizations and start to connect with them. But I would say some of the easiest things is just talk to people in your classrooms, right? Every class that you have, it's going to be, you're going to see some fresh faces, reach out to them, start to build those. Your teachers and your faculty understand what their experience has been and what parts of their experience are interesting to you. I want to say that, I don't know if NEIU has coaching and mentoring options, but those are something to consider. Even if you see someone on LinkedIn where you're like, that person has the exact position that I want, reach out to that person. There's no harm in trying.
Follow-up question.
Yep.
How do you prep for networking? Like, what's the
Prep for networking?
Prep.
Yeah. Practice your elevator pitch. Who are you? How can you make that concise within 30 seconds to a minute? So if you were to ask me, Fidel, what are you all about? Oh, well, I'm a learning and development specialist. My focus is in empowering people to be the best version of themselves as they come into an organization. And even if they leave the organization, to empower them to continue their career. Okay.
Thank you.
So yeah, practice that elevator pitch. It's going to take you a long way. Yeah.
Like anytime you're at an event, you should be networking. So right now you met Fidel, you met me. If you have LinkedIn, you should send us a connection. Right? I encourage all of you to do it. The second thing is, in whatever field you're looking to go into, you have to connect with those industry experts. So when I started with Excel, I went to LinkedIn. At the search bar, you can type in Excel, Microsoft Excel, and then there's a filter for people. The top people that are in the Excel space, one of them's called Oz Dusoliel. He's got the coolest name, Oz. He's got a red mohawk. He teaches Excel, and a whole bunch of other experts. The one book that I highlighted on here that I read, I connected with him on Excel first, Ken Pools and Miguel Escobar. I found them on LinkedIn by being in the Excel space. They were pitching their book. I bought it and I read it. Same thing with Alice Zhao. So if I'm looking for Excel, I connect with Excel experts. If I'm looking for SQL, I connect with SQL experts. I've recently got into Power BI. Well, not recently. I'm in Microsoft for like 5 months now, but I instantly typed in Power BI and started following all the Power BI people out there. If you're trying to go into meteorology, science, forensics, you need to connect with those industry experts. Of course, there's times when you're at like a conference, and that's when you should come up and say, hey, I'm interested in meteorology too. My name's such and such. Let's connect on LinkedIn. Very important that you do that, and the example that I had when I got my job at Microsoft, I was at an event. I was actually at a gym, and I was talking to somebody else about supply chain and data. And the girl that overheard, she said, hey, I heard you're in data. I'm hiring an analyst. I said, let's connect on LinkedIn. We pulled out our phone, connected on LinkedIn. That night, she sent me the job rec and said, hey, just so you know, it closes on Friday if you want to apply. So it's not that hard. We chatted. I'm interested, connect on LinkedIn. So everyone's going to have a different job field, but as you're setting up your LinkedIn, look for that job field, find the industry experts, and just start sending them connection requests. And then what you're going to notice is if they approve or connect, they're going to be interacting with other industry experts, and then you got to start connecting with them too. And you build this network, and then next thing you know, you're kind of in the loop. You're in the industry, right?
And I used to hate going to conferences and talk to people. Also, like full disclosure, I have a bit of a stuttering problem. Now that I've mentioned it, you're probably going to pick up on it. But that's also one of the reasons that I emphasize public speaking to all of you, is because I used to dread having to give a presentation because I would be like, but now through practice, I'm a bit more confident. So definitely just practice your elevator pitch and just get comfortable, just sticking out your hand and just getting to know people. Yes.
We have alumni events coming up. Jessica's actually putting, college money towards events, food and activities. There's a LinkedIn group that you can be connected to. Funny thing, we keep talking about networking, which is going to be our next slide. Networking, but Fidel reached out to me on LinkedIn because I put a post that I would be here on Net Day like 3 weeks ago. And he said, hey man, I'd love to come, hang out. I said, come. Sigdom, the reason I got the event today, Sigdom reached out to me on LinkedIn and said, are you interested in presenting at Net Day? So we keep talking about this LinkedIn. It's important because we're in a digital age. We don't have business cards anymore. Your business card is your LinkedIn profile, and that's how you connect with people. And that's how you tie your resume. And then that's how you get jobs. Like the jobs are, my first job was Indeed. My next 2 jobs, which were, advanced technical jobs, were both applied directly on LinkedIn platform, easy apply, submit it, and I got a recruiter to call me.
Did I see your podium?
No, I love it. I love you. You're doing great. But if you want to, yeah.
Yeah, no, come on up here. It's still your show.
He's a better speaker than me, by the way. I talk quick. If you guys haven't noticed.
Any other questions? Any comments? Go ahead.
What other resource Toastmaster would you recommend? Or so, for instance, I think like one of my issues, anybody else has the same problem as sometimes you think too fast before you speak, so then that's where you start like stuttering or like you can't find the right words.
Yeah.
So what other resources might where you connect your brain to your mouth? Right?
Yeah. I think it's really just about getting those experiences where you're able just to practice it. Like right now, I'm focusing really hard on not speaking 1,000 miles an hour and really focusing on the message that I'm trying to deliver. And that helps slow me down a little bit. Also, maybe I'm actually doing interviews for my company this week. And one of the things I tell all the interviewees is, if I ask you a question, take your time, right? Articulate your thoughts a little bit. Don't just drive to give me an answer. I would want a more substantive answer than one that's quick and you're fumbling over your words and you're not really testing it. So experience, I want to say, it's gonna be the best one. So when you have those chances to give a presentation in front of class, take full advantage of that experience. Walk around the podium, right? Try to throw a joke in there. Just get comfortable. The more practice that you have, when you get into the business realm, it's going to be second nature to you and you're going to definitely stand out.
You're better than I am. I have that problem that you have. I talk quick and my brain's going ahead of my mouth and I try to slow it down. The weird thing is in the technical space, it's like kind of a really good thing. Like when you're on these calls and you're working with a data engineer and you're talking about the code, like sometimes it's like you're both talking really quickly, but you know where you're going. When you get into public speaking like Fidel, I mean, you're smooth. You're smooth up here. So the good news is I don't have that much public speaking besides sharing my knowledge, so it's not a big deal, but it's something I should work on as well. And we got to like continue working on that. So there's no perfection. Like even the top news anchors out there, they have coaches and they get feedback. You know, and that's the key, especially if you're going to be in a client facing role. If you're going to be on conference calls with clients or pitching products, that's where you really want to work on your skills because that'll elevate you into like a sales role or even a customer management role.
Okay. You got a question? Yeah, go ahead.
Comfortable. Hi, Jocelyn. Thank you. How do you guys get comfortable with, because see, my issue is, and what I was going to ask is, how do you kind of like, just for preference, I'm technically the first person in my family to go to college and like to finish and to have a degree and stuff like that. Thank you. But what I find difficult is being able to express myself on LinkedIn in a way where I'm not kind of not overcompensating, but like playing up the skills that I have. And how would you recommend becoming comfortable with displaying your skills on LinkedIn?
We were actually talking about this a little earlier, where it's my brother was a forklift operator, and he came to me with his resume, and it was pretty basic. It was like, yeah, I help, put in all the pallets in the truck, and then I, put some of the information in the computer. And I told him like, hey, there's nothing wrong with us being a bit more descriptive in what you're doing. Like you're doing data input, you're helping with logistics, right? So it's not just, you're not exaggerating, you're really taking a closer look and looking at the skills that you're learning and you're acquiring and you're putting them out there. I think getting some feedback from your colleagues is going to be important. I know that I'm first generation college and MBA graduate. So for me, it was difficult to reach out to like my family members, but you have a great community right here at Northeastern that you can also have them to like, hey, you can give me some feedback on my LinkedIn profile. So I think feedback is going to be my main thing for you. Then
No, sell yourself. You have to sell yourself. Like, especially when you're new, you can't minimize the experience that you have because then you have no experience. So like he said, if your family member was moving pallets and entering it into a system, I'd be like, I have proficiency with data management systems and inputting data and tracking logistics and, operational effectiveness and coming up with policies and procedures to correct issues. It's really what he's doing.
it's not a lie.
It's not a lie.
Just corporate talk.
But if you just say I move pallets and I type in some numbers in a
That
computer,
doesn't show that you're like, what are you really bringing to the table? What is your experience really look like?
It would be like handling your skills into corporate talk.
Corporate language, yeah.
an actual like a job function.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even some of the jobs that you apply for, they'll already do some of the work for you. Like, I think I can do this job. And if you take a look at it, it'll already kind of give you the bullet points. And what you'll do is you'll kind of tailor that into your resume and you'll be like a 1-for-1 match.
So on this topic here, like this is networking. And the point that we're trying to make is obviously network, get involved, you want to do all that. But when you eventually get into a company, there's different teams, right? Leadership, they call that LT, or sometimes ELT, executive leadership team, sales, HR, finance, BI and engineering. These are all hubs in a company. So a lot of times, if you're in a company, you're normally involved with one main hub. If you're in finance, I work with finance. If you're in HR, I work with HR. My part of that networking is trying to get involved with other teams in your company. So of course, whenever I start a new role, I connect with people on LinkedIn in my company. But at the same time, I try to join other calls. So, I'm on like the data and engineering team, but I try to join finance calls and HR calls, and I try to hear some of their pain points. And then you can offer a solution and sometimes get involved on a project. So when I was with Vonage, I was on the BI team. A marketing request came up for an issue. I solved the marketing request. They said, hey, that was really good work you did. Could you help us with this? I started doing more work in marketing. That's how I got into marketing. Now I work for Microsoft Advertising in the marketing department doing data analytics. My transition to marketing was being one of these people on the BI team that eventually went and networked with another hub. So networking goes two ways. One, it's personal, and the other, it's business when you're in the business field. If you find yourself only working with one team, ask your boss, can I join another call? A lot of times in big companies, you're going to get invited to a lot of calls. Start to choose those calls that maybe aren't relevant to your job function, but you're going to meet people and interact. I've done it before too, where someone presented and just did a rock solid job. And I shot him a Teams message afterwards and said, really nice job in that presentation. Oh, hey, it's nice to meet you, blah, blah, blah. And you just make that connection. So it's a never ending journey is the point that we're trying to make. Yeah, I think we've hammered it.
All right, yeah, well, how much time do we have? I think
we're
are we
going
at time?
into questions.
All right, I think we have time for maybe one more.
For your first role that you had a little experience with Excel, how future jobs, do you have any that syndrome that you don't know if you're good enough? Imposter syndrome? And how do you fight it?
Yeah, so imposter syndrome is really big. And the funny thing is, the first time I heard about that word imposter syndrome was when I started at Microsoft. So on the onboarding, they brought up imposter syndrome and they said, it was a new employee onboarding. And they said, look, a lot of you are probably going to have imposter syndrome. Know that you belong here. We encourage you to fail quick and fail fast. That's what they told us. I couldn't believe it. I was like, my first job, if I failed, I get fired. Probably my second job too, by the way. They weren't playing. But this new, bigger company, they're like, we want you to learn and adapt and feel like you belong. So I had imposter syndrome 2 times. When I got my first job, once I got it, I was like, crap, now I got to actually do it. And like, that almost gave me anxiety to the point where I was online learning resources and making myself better. And I can do it because I was literally fighting to keep my job. My first thought was, if I could just keep this job for 2 years, I'll have 2 years experience, because that's what every job online seems to want. So that kind of empowered me. In that first job, I taught myself SQL and Tableau, but I wasn't using it at the company. But I did those online certifications and I kind of knew how to do some code. The second job at Vonage, global company, Ericsson, multi-billion-dollar company, they required SQL and Tableau. And day one, I was going to get access to it and I would have to support teams. I had no experience using it in the business function. Once again, I was like, if I don't learn this now, I'm going to get fired. Like, I do know it, but I'm not using it in a job function. So I immediately, and that's why I'm, preaching to you guys the same thing over and over again. I went to Udemy and I just started taking Udemy courses. Some of these are 3 or 4 hours. But I learned during those courses. It literally shows you how to do it and how to do this. And then I created these awesome reporting, which is, where is it at? This one was one of the first reports. These two, they're separate, 2 different teams. These are the first 2 Tableau reports I created at Vonage. They were a hit and they ran for the entire time I was there. And when I left, I handed them off to somebody else to manage. Like, sales teams use these daily. I learned these skills through doing it. So that's a part of that, kind of fake it till you make it, that imposter syndrome. Use it as a strength. Luckily the company I'm at now, they're not so strict where I'm worried I'm going to get fired if I don't know something, but they'll expect that I learn it, if that helps.
For the courses you took that are 4 hours long, do you think you can learn all that you can in those 4 hours, or do you believe that there's more?
So those courses are typically what they call like a tract, like there's a series of them. So it'll typically start with an introduction, move into an intermediate, and then move into like very specialty use cases. So yes, in the introduction, I think you'll be familiar to talk and understand some of the basics in the user interface, they call it, the UI, and some of the keystrokes that you need. And then if you want to get better, take the intermediate. And then there's like very specific ones, like if you're doing data science or time series or you name it. If you go to like Data Camp right now and type in Microsoft Excel, there's probably like 30 Excel courses, but the first two is introduction and intermediate. I would recommend those as just a base. And like you said, 2 to 3 hours, it's not taking forever. I wouldn't breeze through it. I wouldn't say, hey, this is a 3-hour course. I'm going to sit down for 3 hours, watch it and be done. I would break that into chunks, like 30, 40 minutes. And then I would practice it on the side, take notes, and then refresh your mind because we can only absorb so much in one sitting.
If I can just add on to that. So from a learning and development standpoint, be an active learner, meaning don't just listen to the video or the course, take notes. Take a moment to pause and synthesize what they're trying to teach you. Because a lot of these things, you're probably going to pay for it. It's taking some of your time. Time is money. Make the best use out of each of those courses. Don't just fly through it. Make sure that you're walking. Even the classes that you take right now, I think the one thing I regret from my undergrad is I thought it was all fun and games. And then only when I got into my master's that I was paying a lot of money for, I was like, all right, I'm sitting in the front of the class. I'm paying attention to all the teachers, to all the sessions. But if you can walk away with just making sure that you take advantage of all the classes that you have, all the faculty, and really think about the set of skills that you're trying to develop for the workplace, it's gonna advance your career exponentially. Yeah.
Okay, hi Chris. Thank you for your presentation. You mentioned last in your slide that they use more MySQL than Postgres. I just want to know which criteria do you use, and you said that they are using MySQL than Postgres because with my experience, we use and a lot of companies they use Postgres. Yeah. But you say that you have this skill and this. You say that they use MySQL. I don't know which criteria you use to mention that. And my second question is which implementation you apply for data normalization, for example.
Okay, so to answer the first question, SQL is a universal language. It's called structured query language. I've had calls with people in Spain. We're writing the same code. Like it's a standard code. Every one of these systems, there's minor differences in the syntax. Sometimes you put a limit clause at the end. Sometimes you have to put a top clause in the beginning. Sometimes it's a date value. Sometimes it's just a date. Like there's different minor little things in the code, right? But 90% of all of these are the same language, structured query language, SQL. So I learned on Postgre because it's free. I got that book for $20. I downloaded my computer. It's free. Why is it popular? Because it's free. The problem with it is it runs on your local PC. I can't do 50 million records of data on my local PC. You know, maybe if I build a network at home, I don't know. Like some companies do that. Some companies get terabyte servers and they try to run like a PostgreSQL. Smaller company, maybe a regional company, but it's impossible for a national or a multinational company to use a local. What I mean by local is like an actual hard drive system to run SQL. Yeah. That being said, I learned on Postgre, right? And then I jumped into an expensive one like Snowflake. The difference between Postgre and Snowflake was probably like a 97% match. It was like second language, like, oh, I know Snowflake now. You know, there's some that are a little bit different. So I wouldn't get caught up on which one do I know. I would learn one. So if you're currently using Postgre, you're on a great path. And that language is going to communicate to almost all of these. You know, and the way that you find out is when you eventually switch, which is a new company, you try some of your code and you get an error message. But the good news is it's going to tell you what line your error message is on. So to say line 57 has an error message. Oh, then what do? I go to Google, or what's called Stack Overflow is a very popular tech website. And I type in how to do a case statement in MySQL. And the wording will be slightly different. So don't get caught up in which one you're using. It's the fact that you're using one. And if you're using Postgre, you're good to go. The second question, could you repeat it?
Yeah, data normalization. How do you apply because you with Microsoft, I think it's a bunch of information and we need data integrity. So which method do you use for data normalization in your system?
Got it. So data normalization is a very complex topic, especially if you're doing like statistical analysis. The issue that I have at Microsoft is you're never going to be able to analyze a whole database at once because accounts are so different. I've just had this problem that I'm working on this week where we have what's called an SMB segment, small to mid-sized business. These are customers that spend up $5 a month, $300 a month, up until $2,500, $25,000 a month, or even $100,000 a month. Once you go above 100,000 a month, you move into different classes of customers. So the problem I have now is the SMB represents 400,000 accounts. I have little mom and pop bakeries that are spending $300 a month on advertising, and I have large regional companies that are spending $50,000 a month on advertising. So the team said, the question was, how is SMB performing? I can't take 400,000 accounts and say, give me the average. It doesn't make any sense. So as part of normalization, there's statistical methods, but then there's like common sense. And a lot of times what you're going to have to do is sample your data, come up with your what's called business logic, right? Business logic. How are you going to do it? So the method that I did was I took accounts that are spending between no less than $1,000 a month, no more than $5,000 a month, all that were acquired last year, and have 12 consistent months of spend. I narrowed it down. I got 81 accounts. So now I have 81 clean accounts that are in the same spend bracket that were onboarded at the same time and all have consistent 12 months. Because remember, some accounts might churn or only advertise for 2 or 3 months. And then I ran an analysis on those 81 accounts and I came up with an average for that group. So to answer the guy's question of how's SMB doing as a whole, I can't tell you. It's 400,000 accounts. But in this pay range, spend range, for these accounts that were acquired last year that haven't churned, this is what we're noticing.
Okay.
So part of that normalization is choosing the correct sample to analyze.
All right. Thanks so much.
Yep.
We got a question from Jessica.
Not quite a question. I wanted to also advocate for the fact that the College of Business and Technology has Coursera available for all of our students for free. And this is a space that you can go and get these credentials and certifications on us, right? So in addition, alumni have access to it at a pay rate, but it beats the price if you're going on Coursera directly. So do take advantage of that. There are 496 courses you have access to. What's interesting too is that they're the Career Academy courses, which means that IBM, Microsoft, Google have identified the courses that are a pipeline to the jobs to the qualifications of those jobs that they are looking for. So do take advantage of it. Today at 2 o'clock, Rachel from Coursera will be here to talk more about it. I believe it's 2 o'clock. I'm sorry if that's wrong, but check your email, get on there, start working. I know we're going to do some cool things over this year with it, but take advantage so that you get that experience that Chris is and Fidel. I was like going to say Guzman.
I know.
Fidel was speaking about. So thank you. 3 o'clock. Rachel will be here at 3 o'clock.
I think we have about 4 minutes left. If anyone has any questions on the materials that we had today, career advice in general, I mean, Microsoft, I know the topic's AI, anything that you guys have, we can answer it. Otherwise, we could stay after a network, connect. But I hope everybody got something of value. That was the goal, right? Yeah. I hope people found this presentation valuable. The main thing.
And thank all of you for your participation and your questions and the engagement. It's much appreciated. Round of applause to you guys too.